Good evening. This video is for Rabbitcat and it's on why I haven't attended the streams of Mr. Sin for a year. Since I haven't attended his streams for a year, it is fair to say that any person has the right to change their political views and the right to not be harassed by their previous political views, except maybe when their previous political views drove them to criminal activity. But then again, I have a feeling that most people don't usually change their political views so rapidly. It all started when Mr. Sin was covering the then upcoming Q&A video of ALR, uh, Amberlyn Reid, and when viewing the questions submitted, someone had asked a rather trollish question: "What does Amberlyn think of NATO?" And Mr. Sin reacted by saying something like, "No way Amberlyn could provide a comprehensive response to that. She might not even know what NATO is." But I know what NATO is. NATO is a weak organization, and basically they started the current war in Ukraine. At which point I asked directly whether he was pro-Russian, and to that he responded with, "Fuck no." But then proceeded to explain how NATO started the war by not respecting the borders of basically 1989, and how it broke its promise to not expand eastward, and also that Ukraine is a little bit blamed from the war also because Ukraine didn't allow Russia to access Russia's own port, which should sound a little bit idiotic to anyone of Russian propaganda. Since there is a chance that Mr. Sin has changed his views on Russian invasion of Ukraine, I shall address his views as those belonging to a Mr. Everyday American. Mr. Everyday American, you don't need to knowingly be pro-Russian to be pro-Russian. In fact, it was recently uncovered that since there is a chance that Mr. Sin has changed his views on Russian invasion of Ukraine, I shall address his views as those belonging to a Mr. Everyday American. Mr. Everyday American, you don't need to knowingly be pro-Russia to be pro-Russia. In fact, it was recently revealed that the Kremlin was paying certain American influencers to spread the Russian narrative. And in the internal notes, it was revealed that the Kremlin actually preferred those individuals who didn't know they were spreading Russian narrative. And let's not even mention Elon Musk and his newly acquired platform that, under the guise of free speech, is spreading Russian propaganda. But back to your claims. Well, now, about your claims. The last one is actually easy because Crimea and thus Sevastopol are the rightful territories of Ukraine, and Ukraine has the right to either allow or disallow another country to operate in their territory. The first one is a little longer, and I purposely mentioned that your claim basically means that NATO didn't respect the borders of 1989. But did you know that in the early 2000s, Russia actually wanted to join NATO? At that time, a bunch of ex-Soviet countries, along with ex-Eastern Bloc countries, uh, wanted to join NATO. I mean, were in queue to join NATO. And in one of those meetings, Russia was also present. And that is where the claim of NATO's promise to not expand eastward comes from. Somewhere outside official meetings, Putin pulled one of the NATO representatives aside and asked, "Hey, when will NATO send an invitation for Russia to join NATO?" To which the representative, to his best recollection, replied that um, NATO doesn't send out invites. Russia should apply like all the other countries. To which Putin reportedly said, I don't want to stand in a queue with countries that doesn't matter." So when Putin arrived back in Russia, he began to form the narrative that NATO promised him never to expand eastwards. Meanwhile, as a result of this expansion, many countries, including the Baltic states and Poland, joined NATO, and these countries directly border Russia, but I guess Russia didn't want to attack NATO. In 2023, Finland and Sweden decided to break their neutrality and request joining NATO. Finland joined first, but before they did, Russia issued several warnings that if Finland and Sweden joined NATO, there will be consequences. But a few days before Finland officially joined NATO, Putin, I would like to imagine that Putin did a big anima eyes and said, "Well, we never had anything against Finland joining NATO." And actually, a few months after Finland officially joined, there were reports that Russia is taking their army away from the border with Finland, which seems to indicate that they don't actually mm, expect an attack from NATO, which goes against their propaganda. And Russia often justifies their interference in Ukraine by claiming that first, there are Nazis in Ukraine, and second, they want to protect the Russian speakers in Ukraine, which is also what they claim about the Baltic states or Poland. But the real reason Russia invaded Ukraine is because they were losing their influence over Ukraine. Russia was too late to stop the Baltic states or Poland from becoming more westernized, but now they saw that Ukraine was also on the path of perhaps joining European Union or NATO or both, and they wanted to stop it. Their initial plan was to take Ukraine, or at least most of Ukraine, in 3 days, but since it didn't happen, they are now working hard to convince Western leaders that they only want Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. And the Western leaders, the ones they have managed to more or less convince, are all saying that, oh, we don't want war, we want peace, and what's one little red Zaporozhye compared to world peace. But does Mr. American Everyman, for example, know that in 2022 there was a pretty big campaign in Russia that Alaska belongs to Russia, and their claim was that Russia only loaned Alaska to the United States for 99 years, and now the loan is up and they have to give Alaska back. It is pretty absurd to imagine that Russia would attack United States, but let's suppose they did. I wonder, would there still be American politicians along with American everyman that would say that we should not send the military or military help to Alaska because it would be escalation. Speaking of politicians who don't want to send military help to places that need military help, Donald Trump has said many incorrect things. One of those incorrect things is that Volodymyr Zelensky is the greatest salesman. Every time Zelensky comes to the United States, he leaves with $100 billion or 60 billion. The amount varies. Actually, it's not even wrong to put monetary value on the aid because everything costs money. But the problem is that many Western politicians and mortal men think that if the government says that they will give 6 billion euros or $6 billion aid to Ukraine, that would mean that the government of said country would write a check to the Ukrainian government, or maybe even Zelensky himself, and say, take this piece of paper and take it to the bank. They will give you money. The reality is that Ukraine seldomly sees any money from the said aid. The majority of the aid stays in the case of United States. The majority of the money stays in United States and goes for um, uh, basically building weapons and paying the salaries of all the employees involved. And the cherry on top, so to speak, is that the newly built weapons don't even go to Ukraine. What goes to Ukraine is the old weaponry that in other case would just be destroyed and go to waste. The last thing I wanted to address in this video is that the person who sold me this hat, Estonian YouTuber Artur Rehi, there might be a link, came up with his own scenario of what would he do if he was a dictator who wanted to invade another country without any third countries coming to help out the country and trying to invade. I would seek out any internal problems these potentially helping countries might have, no matter how small the issue. Then I would find political groups that want to focus on this issue. Then I would finance the hell out of those issues until public perception of those issues is so big that they demand action from politicians, which in turn makes forces politicians to focus on these internal issues rather than mm, perhaps helping out the country that I'm trying to invade. When in reality, those issues are either largely made up or have always been there, just not as big and fear educing as these groups make it seem. Alright, I don't know how to end this video, and probably by the time I have finished editing this, the elections in United States have already been concluded and someone would have won. I just hope you voted for Kamala Harris while you still had the chance, because she, at least somewhat, understands that Russia must be defeated and Russia cannot be appeased by giving up territory. It already happened during the first invasion of Ukraine. And the delusion of Trump that he will finish the war in 24 hours because he knows Zelensky and he knows Putin, it would never work because only Putin can finish the war, and Putin does not want to finish the war. Many Western politicians have been pushing Ukraine for peace talks with Russia, but maybe only a couple have asked Russia whether they want to talk peace with Ukraine, and Russia does not want to talk peace with Ukraine. Peace with you. Because he knows Zelensky and he knows Putin, and he will make them talk